Life is so boring. I'd die without gossip.
That's what servants are for.
Another party game.
What would you say to some unusual gossip over dinner?
Honestly, why can't they keep all that riffraff in a separate place?
That's a jolly good idea.
The aristocrats make up the ruling class of the empire, holding the vast majority of land, wealth, and industrial power. Theirs is a fickle world where those without enough backing can fall out of favor from the slightest political mistake or social gaffe. Aristocracy is centered around families as the basic unit, and power often lies with inherited titles or properties. This makes any individual within a family a secondary consideration, even expendable if the honor of the family is at stake. When using the heart on non-primary NPCs, the lines heard are class-specific. In addition to the simple honorific of Lord or Lady, some nobles may have specific titles such as Duke, Count, Baron, or Marquis. According to the Fandom Wiki, there are various ranks of aristocracy. I believe this information comes from the Dishonored RPG Game Master's Kit, which I don't own. But for now, I'll present it as true. The highest rank, Landgrave Peers, represents the oldest and most respected families in the Empire, owning the largest hereditary lands up to the size of whole counties. Some of these names you know, the Boyles and Buntings, as well as some you might not, like the Archers. Their power is such that even contracting plague might not get them sent to the flooded district if they grease enough palms. However, even the accusation of plague is enough to get a family removed from guest lists and shunned socially, which might be just as bad from their perspective. The Boyle family is one of the oldest and most illustrious in Bristol. Their family has both large landholdings and various business interests, such as Boyle Industries. During the rat plague, crystals were discovered on their land that was vital for the many rat lights we see around Dunwall, further increasing their wealth. Their masquerade ball is the social event of the year, and who does or does not get invited can make or break other families' reputations. Ichabod Boyle was the head of Boyle Industries until his murder by the Crown Killer in 1852. The only member of the Bunting family we know of is the art dealer. Since he comes from one of the highest-ranking families, we can infer this activity is more of a hobby than a business he needs to keep himself fed. His connections likely allowed him access to the Sokolov paintings he acquired. The Pendleton family is another landowning family, and their wealth derives mostly from mining operations. This is at least partly through slave labor, using captives brought from Pandysia. After having made an improper remark to Jessamine at a state dinner, Corvo ejected Custis Pendleton without even knowing who he was. Morgan is known for having sadistic appetites at the Golden Cat. The middle rank of Viscounty peers represents those nobles owning lands adding up to the size of towns.
Or is that Viscounty?
These aristocrats are in the process of trying to move up into the highest echelon or to prevent falling further down. Notable families of this rank include the Brimsleys, Brisbys, the Prismalls, the Shaws, and the Timpshes. Near the end of the flooded district mission, Corvo encounters the Brimsleys holed up in a house. As middle-rank aristocrats, they did not have the money to keep from being deported there after contracting the plague. They are most notorious for worshipping the outsider, according to both Ella at the Boyle party and Bunting. In low chaos, they both survive the plague, with Mace Brimsley amazed that he's one of the few immune. But in high chaos, they are both weepers. Their humbled state does not seem to have tamped down their aristocratic arrogance, though. Lord Shaw displays a typical aristocrat's sense of dignity, having challenged Pendleton to a duel over an insult to his wife, which Corvo is tricked into fighting. Arnold Timsh, in addition to his family's landholdings, serves as a city barrister, and in this capacity is able to rob families of their wealth on the accusation of having plague. His niece Talia is keen to move up in society, and hires Dowd to obtain his will in exchange for information on Delilah. Baronial peers are lower-ranked families struggling to keep their status and hold lands equivalent to less than a village, or a city neighborhood. Their standing relies on their personal relationships with higher-ranked families. These include the Crawfords, the Hardings, the Ramsays, and the Whites. An interesting case study is the Ramsay family. In Dishonored 1, we see Jack Ramsay is involved in whale oil processing. But we learn in Dishonored 2 that Mortimer Ramsay resents his family's fall from higher ranks. Since the whale oil revolution is less than 50 years old, we could infer that the Ramsays have been forced to dirty their hands with business rather than rely on land income. Though City Watch officers are usually drawn from the aristocracy, Mortimer also resents this position, implying that the highest ranks of nobility consider themselves above even this. So you can see a clash between old landed money and new industrial money in this dynamic, a theme common in shows in our world like Downton Abbey and The Gilded Age. Miss White is also of this rank, but seems content with it at the Boyle party at least, so maybe her family rose up from beneath rather than sinking from above. Gentry peers are the lowest level of aristocrats, basically associate members who have wealth and influence, but not necessarily lands or a long family history. You can imagine that if, for example, Bundray Rothwild is not disposed of, he could rise into this class with time, though it might be several generations before his family could be considered for any higher rank. There are multiple families we encounter whose ranks are not known. These include, but are not limited to, the Alderdices, the Burrows, the Campbells, the Carmines, the Coleridges, the Morays, the Pratchetts, the Perths, and the Rowlands. Some of these we know made their fortunes in business, so are likely in the middle or lower ranks. The vast majority of these aristocrats are Gristolian, since the people of Gristol are particularly obsessed with social hierarchy. Vera Moray was born Vera Dougal in Morley before marrying Preston Moray. The Morays were at one time considered equal to the Boyles. After Vera went mad and became Granny Rags, the Moray family is considered extinct. Other defunct families include the Olaskirs, who lost power after the assassination of Empress Larissa Olaskir in 1803, and the Brigmores, who went bankrupt when their timber industry failed. As I mentioned in previous videos, this might have been caused by a rising steel industry brought by the whale oil revolution. The major noble families of Serkonos are the Abels, who currently rule, and Aventas, who previously ruled after ousting the last king of Serkonos during the War of Four Crowns. One bright spot among Serkonan aristocracy is Aramis Stilton, who worked his way up to wealth from the mines and uses his power to help the miners and improve conditions in the Dust District. Of course, the most powerful family at the time of Dishonored is the Kaldwin dynasty. Their rank before Euhorn Kaldwin took the throne is not known, only that they were considered distant from it, so likely they were a middle-ranked family. It's possible they were chosen by Parliament after the end of the Olaskir dynasty to be a safe choice, with few major enemies or allies among the elites, and thus may be easier to influence. Emperors of the Holy Roman Empire were often chosen by the electors for this same reason. Gossip and innuendo is the lifeblood of the aristocracy. A family maintains its standing as much through social events displaying their wealth as actual profitable activity. The masquerade ball and fireworks at the Boyle Mansion are typical of these. In addition to insults, they routinely plot against each other's reputations, even to the point of trying to manipulate rivals into speaking treasonous thoughts out loud, such as in the case of Byron Alderdice. One popular topic of conversation is a family's real or implied occult dealings. unlike the superstitious common folk, they have no problem invoking magic or appeals to the outsider in order to increase their wealth and power. Multiple members of the Boyle, Pratchett, Pendleton, and other families keep runes and bone charms locked away for generations because they believe it has helped them. One aristocratic woman even had a facsimile of the mark of the outsider tattooed on her back. The Timpsch family held at least one seance that invoked Delilah, and party guests gossip about the bizarre rituals the Brimsleys supposedly took part in. Even young Emily apparently attended a seance at some point, perhaps in an attempt to contact her dead mother, or maybe just to conjure a witch to dance for them, though it seems it only succeeded in drawing a brief presence that might have been either Delilah or the outsider. These families possess a large number of heirlooms worth various amounts of coin, which we encounter throughout the city. The implication is that these families have been forced to sell off the trinkets for cash as their fortunes waned at various times. Statues and war medals are common items to loot, and the status of the family they come from determines their value. For example, Boyle and Brigmore heirlooms are worth 150 coins, Perth and Moray items only 50. There is a frustrating lack of information available on the structure of the Gristol Parliament. This governing body makes laws not just for Gristol, but the whole empire, and counterbalances the power of the emperors. Many, if not most aristocrats, including nobility, hold seats in Parliament, which passes laws for the empire and sets limits on the monarch. This includes rulers from the other isles. The King and Queen of Morley, the Duke of Serkonos, and even the Presidium of Tivia collectively hold a certain number of votes. And presumably these votes are not tied to any one individual, though it's likely that their votes are granted to proxies for day-to-day business. The power of regional ruling bodies depends on the isle. Tivia is largely independent, while Morley's laws are completely subject to Parliament. Parliament was established soon after the War of Four Crowns, before which the King of Gristol likely ruled more absolutely. Laws are passed by Parliament with the assent of the Emperor, and in the case of a regent, a number of laws can only be altered by Parliament. Funding is largely under the control of Parliament, for example, and was used by the Loyalist conspiracy to hobble Hiram Burroughs' regime. Votes in Parliament rest with a specific family or ruling body. Similarly, an aristocratic family's votes are vested in representatives from that family and passed to another member in the event of a death. In this way, Trevor Pendleton inherited his older brother's votes, though the number of votes does not change. A family's votes depends on the degree of wealth, power, and influence that family wields. If a family is defunct, such as the Morays or Brigmores, their votes are likely reappropriated and redistributed to other candidates from around the empire. There are various obscure rules that complicate voting, such as the fact that the conservative position is awarded 3 extra votes, except in the month of Timber. It goes without saying that there is no working-class representation in Parliament. Showing any hint of concern for the problems of the common folk is a good way to get laughed at and one's proposals ignored. However, in or after 1852, one parliamentarian, Archibald Wainwright, has resigned his rightful seat in order to become an advocate for working-class enfranchisement. He argues that even under a supposedly good ruler, a dictator like Delilah could still take over, and this instability is cause enough to dissolve the monarchy. The anarchist rat gang uses him for their own ends, but even after admitting to the benefits of Emily's reign, remains a democratic reformer. A slumlord member of the previous generation of his family was referred to as a shriveled old leech, so it was probably seeing this behavior that spurred him to reformism. Another Parliament member, Lord Estermont, was not well liked enough for his fellows to rescue him when rats swarmed his office during the plague, and they barricaded him up until his screams stopped. The middle-ranked Inchmouths are also known to be members of Parliament and own an estate in the Mucherhaven district next to the Brigmore Mansion, though little is known of them. The Parliament building is located on Parliament Street, near the clock tower and next to the estate district. And a mission involving this location was planned for Dishonored 1, but was cut out. In 1852, Delilah started a fire that severely damaged the building and cost many lives. The aristocracy in Dishonored represents the worst aspects of humanity on display. During the plague, they shut themselves off from the real world and threw lavish parties, indulging in idle gossip as well as sadistic cruelties to distract themselves. Perhaps the true horror of the game is the banality of their evil, and it's only through systematically attacking the pillars of their wealth and power that Corvo manages to restore the rightful heir to the throne. Even the so-called good ending shows the endurance of their backstabbing ways. The alternative, however, is complete chaos, at least until visionaries like Wainwright can forge a middle path that harnesses working-class potential for transformational change.